Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back and we're going to be discussing the disappointing result against Crystal Palace, going down 2-0 in what was a bit of an embarrassing display from Fulham. Lacklustre, admittedly potentially lost to the better team on the day, but a really disappointing day out for Fulham and for Fulham fans. Here to talk it all through. As always, we have Skibby. How are we going, Skibby?
Yeah, I'm all good. Pretty deflated,
Doesn't
as we
sound it.
talked about before we went on. No, I'm still really pissed off about it all. So it's all very fresh still. So, but no, I mean there was some good positives which we'll get into. It wasn't at the game. I just went to the new Flatiron in Hammersmith, which was fantastic. So that was a good positive. A steakhouse for those that don't know. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much the end of the positives for me.
Well, looking forward to having you on the show today, Skibby.
Glad to be here.
And also we have Elton. How are we going, Dad?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm not feeling so downbeat. It was, I think, a bit of a wake up call for us. Really, it couldn't be more of a contrast from the week before or the Forest game. But yeah, happy to talk about this one. I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Isn't it frustrating how we consistently have wake-up calls every sort of 3 weeks or so? We go on a lovely run, play really well, and then we have to have a wake-up call for some reason when we don't
And
even
always
seem
at
to
home.
fall asleep. Yeah, and, brilliant result against a Nottingham Forest team that are flying high and can't be touched by the best teams in the Premier League, and then go to Crystal Palace and just absolutely cock it up effectively, or rather have Crystal Palace come to us and cock it up. Before we get into the game itself, as always, let's have a quick chat about the Discord. A great place. We've seen it really burgeon over the last couple of weeks. A number of new additions to the Discord and lots of chat, especially on game day. Really do love our community, which is growing constantly. So please do check out the Discord. You'll be able to find the links everywhere, all over our socials. And yeah, it's just grown into this really wonderful place where you can talk all things Fulham. There's none of the noise that you get on other social media platforms. It's just Fulham-based content, which is great. We've got great people like Cottage Tactical in there. We saw his video, and being able to actually talk to him about the tactical side of all things Fulham is something we're really fortunate to have access to. Fulham fan news in there as well, giving us a first look at everything, and just a bunch of really good people giving really good opinions. So do check out the Discord. If you have any questions about how to get there, feel free to just pop a comment in and we'll flick you the link. The game itself, like I said, it's a really disappointing. We're all pretty flat afterwards because it did feel like a result that should have been the other way around. We played so well against Forest. We outwitted them tactically, and it was the complete flip side of it against Palace. This is a side who we've struggled to beat at the Cottage, as we talked about in the preview. We haven't won against Crystal Palace at Craven Cottage since 2005. But this seemed like an opportunity for Fulham to just kick on and take that next step, and something that we've really struggled to do this season is back up good results. Skibby, going into this game, we obviously knew Palace are a decent enough side, but this surely was chalked down early doors as what should be a comfortable win for Fulham.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't involved in the previews, but I wouldn't say as comfortable. But I think it should have been more competitive than it was. So I think off the back of probably one of our best performances of the season against Forest, where we just dominated every kind of area of the pitch, we then, obviously, the typical Marco way, we didn't change it up. Therefore, we had faith we could potentially just do not a rinse and repeat, but something very similar in a way that, we know that Palace are an aggressive, quite a physical team. But I think we still had enough about us for, the more technical passing and the plays that we create. And I wouldn't say it would be a definite win, but I did think it would be much more competitive than it actually was. But they were just that centre of the park for Palace, and it's always that cliche, isn't it, where the centre of the park is where the match is won. And I think just going into it with Berger and Lukic being as technical and as physical as they have shown in previous games, you thought that's a very good matchup against this very kind of aggressive Palace team. But it just seemed to be that they, as we go into it, were more aggressive and more combative and just really wanted it more than we did.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because we did play so well against Forest and tactically, and we saw it in that video that Kish from Cottage Tactico did. We outwitted Forest, especially through the middle of the park. We saw Lukic drift out wide and create space. And Dad, against Palace, I don't know what it was, but we just seemed to lose that tactical edge against them. Do you think that's down to maybe a misstep from Marco, or do you think Oliver Glasner at Palace actually sort of out-tacticked us on the day?
I'm still trying to process that word you're trying to say there.
Yeah. It's an invention. It's good.
I think a bit of both and a bit of all of those things. I think that both Robinson and Adama were, they were kept very quiet, and the both players on those guys did very, very well, and it and in on top of that, they actually pressed the centre backs with the ball very hard when we were trying to come out of defence, and so our normal paths out of defence were sort of cut off. And we did try to go the long ball occasionally and try to go more direct through the middle. But it seemed like they really did quite simple things to stifle us. And I remember saying to you yesterday that it really feels like, 3 at the back and 4 in midfield is our kryptonite, which is not very good at it. At playing against it, and but I think there's some slightly more worrying things to really unpack here in terms of I don't think we're adapting anywhere near enough in terms of our starting lineup, and they're not making the changes during the game to when it's pretty obvious that things aren't working. We're not reacting quick enough. And so to your comment about the tactical game between the managers, I definitely think Silva was done yesterday. I really do. I think he was beaten on the chessboard.
Yeah, no, I agree with that entirely, and I think we'll obviously get on to the subs because we had.
What do you think?
No, Jack's still there for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I'm still here. We definitely had a number of issues with our substitutes, I think, and it's something we've touched on multiple times with Marco Silva and the way he runs this Fulham side. His substitutes have been really good this season, to be fair, but I think yesterday he got it really wrong. I don't think Tom Cairney coming on when he did was the right call. I think Muniz should have come on kind of at half-time when we realised, I think Jimenez, it felt like had maybe 2 or 3 touches in the whole of the first half and was just looking like he wasn't troubling Lacroix, who had a very good game, to be fair, at all. And I think we really need to review that starting lineup because, yes, we played well against Forest and got the win, but it feels like this team could do so much better when we get it right. It felt like yesterday needed Willian, needed Pereira, needed Muniz for just that their ability to change the game and be a little bit more dynamic. I think Adama didn't have the best game yesterday. He didn't do anything particularly wrong, but he was completely shut out by Tyreek Mitchell, which is for me quite poor because I don't think Mitchell's the best left back in the league. I'd expect him to give the same kind of issues that he gave Nico Williams the week before. And additionally, I thought Iwobi was very quiet. I thought, Jimenez struggled. Robinson really struggled to get into the game. There were a number of players who just couldn't break through. And I worry that when we go up against Wolves in midweek, we're going to see similar sort of issues. Skibby, I'll throw to you on this one. And it was something that popped up right from the very start of the game. And I'm always the one who says I don't want to be this person talking about referees, but
Oh God.
this and it's interesting because before the game, I said, "Oh, we saw the players lining up in the tunnel," and I was sat watching the game with Dad, and I said, "Oh, I noticed the referee and went, oh, I do not like this referee." Couldn't remember his name for love nor money, but I saw his face and I went, I remember this bloke. He's very full of himself. He loves to be completely in control, and I do not like him." And we saw within the first 5 minutes, he just wanted to be centre of attention and we're just refusing to give clear and obvious fouls. And I just wonder, like, your thoughts on this refereeing performance in total. We've seen some bad ones this season. For me, that was right up there.
Yeah, it was definitely up there. I think, and it doesn't matter what level it is, whether it be Premier League, whether it be Sunday League with your mates in a pub team. As soon as you start to feel the refs against you, your head goes, and and I think what makes it even worse is, especially when I think one of the first challenges was on Smith Rowe on his ankle, which I think ended up being the reason why he got subbed. But to not give a foul there, obviously, when he's gone over in a heap and is down, and it's, I know he's
just
quite
clear and obvious. Like,
yeah, he's quite a flimsy bloke, but it's not like him to stay down. And I think with that, it was just so obvious from any part of the stadium, but he screened play on, and then it starts to rise up, and it starts to really, it just got really toxic in the stadium. There was a lot of booing, a lot of chants towards the referee, and like I said, when you get it in Sunday League, you're all thinking, oh, this effing ref, he's against us, blah, 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 and your head starts to go, and you just feel like everything you do is just going to get pulled up by the ref, or not even pulled up by the ref when it's for you, pulled up when it's against you, and it just boils and boils and boils. And then to have 24,000 people thinking the exact same thing and voicing their concern, you're going to start having that mentality of, well, it's not just me then, is it? Then if all these fans are seeing the exact same thing that I'm feeling, you start to get a bit of head loss. And from that moment, that's where we started to lose control of the game, because I thought that at the beginning we were finding
fairly
some
even.
Gaps. It was pretty even, and I think we were fine. And I think we were showing. I think Mateta had one chance to hit the side netting, but I thought we were getting in the better positions with Iwobi down that left hand side. I think Smith Rowe was getting, and then Robinson was trying to get to the byline. We got Traore away a couple of times, I think, and it started to take shape, sort of about that sort of 15-minute mark. And then as soon as that one sort of foul doesn't go your way, it was visible that the head loss was coming, and it went on to their first goal, where for me Bassi has danced through a lot of challenges and he's been absolutely wiped out. I haven't seen it back in like step by step or freeze frame, but for me it was a foul. He looks like he gets past his man, he gets his legs taken away, and the ref says play on, and then sure enough they score from the corner, the resulting corner. And again, when it's all boiling up, as soon as you concede a goal and that's gone against you in that kind of fashion, that's where you explode. And I think that's where the game was lost. I think there's just too much of a head loss from that moment that you just couldn't recover. And it just feel like the world's against you, whether the world being a referee in this situation.
And I'll throw this to you, and I mean, Dave's not here to defend himself, so I can go and actually put words in his mouth. But he put an interesting comment in our little WhatsApp group this morning, basically posing the question. I'll pose it to you: is saying, has Marco sort of instilled this culture where, and maybe culture is maybe the wrong word, but this sort of feeling where when results do go against us, we see Marco on the touchline, he always is going mad. And I kind of love that passion from the coach. But we are starting to see that when things go against us, there is a bit of a head loss issue. And I think we saw that with the first goal as well. Just before that corner comes in, the referee walks over to Anderson and gives him a bit of a ticking off, because Mateta is clearly just pushing him, and Anderson pushes him back. Referee doesn't go over and talk to both players, just talks to Anderson, and you can see the frustration in Anderson's face and a few very choice words from Anderson at that point as well, to the referee, to his face, which I think were quite fair as well. But Anderson wasn't in the right frame of mind when that ball's coming in. It is a bit of a head loss. And he gets pulled out of position, he gets pushed around a bit and should probably be doing better there. And I think that contributes to the first goal going in, at which point the game kind of completely got away from us. But do you agree with Dave in a way that maybe we do have issues with losing our heads in situations like that and we struggle to stay calm?
100%. 100%. I mean, we saw it at Old Trafford, and that head loss basically stemmed from Marco, if I'm honest, because, Willian's handled it on the line, pretty obvious. The refs then had a look at it, and for whatever reason, Marco is really berating the fourth official for that. And then that, for me, then spills over into the players. And that's when Mitrovic has gone insane and decided to let the ref know his thoughts. And I think it's just a way. And I mean, this actually brings me to quite a funny story, which was I used to play in Hungary. They didn't let foreigners play with Hungarians. I don't know why. It's just not the way. So I had to join an expat team. Yeah, but my expat team wasn't a load of English blokes. It was all Spanish, South Americans. So you had like Brazilian, Mexicans, all the lots. And oh my word, when it comes down to sort of the Latin flair, the Latin fire as well, it comes with it. And I've never experienced head loss at such an amateur level where it was literally about, I think we were in a squad of maybe about 18, 19 players. And there was me and one other English guy that, whenever it all kicked off, we just went and sat on the bench and just wait for it all to calm down. Because when they're wound up, they feel like the whole world is against them. And there is just no seeing through this red mist. And you have to wait for it to clear. And I do feel like Marco and his team suffer from very much the same kind of... because from the same sort of... I was going to say condition. That seems wrong to say, but it does seem to be a thing around that kind of culture. It seems to be a culture thing.
Yeah, those clips you see from like South America where you got players chasing each other and trying to drop kick each other, running around the edge of the pitch and stuff.
Drop kick a referee as well.
Yeah, it does feel like it's almost on the tipping point of that sometimes. And I also wonder
to be fair, Jack. To be fair, and Skibby, I actually, Anderson was very miffed because, to be fair, in the shithousery of the moment, Mateta's got the better of Anderson. He literally was pushing him, shoving him when the referee wasn't looking, and he was winding him up and just being childishly annoying.
He knows him, doesn't
he? Yeah, obviously very, very effective. But in the actual moment, those are very difficult when that ball's coming in. And you've got a player in front of you who, line of sight, that ball's coming in. It looks like it's going to hit the top of his head. And so Anderson kind of loses it. He turns his head because it's going to hit him in the face.
We're not doubting that it's a bit unfortunate for the goal. It's more you're suggesting that there's a connection between Anderson's own goal and kind of losing concentration there. I am. I think he actually was out of position when the ball comes in.
He kind of loosely throws himself at the ball.
Yeah, he should have actually been in front of the player, goal side. He's actually stuck in between two Palace players, and he's lost his man at that point. So I'm not saying he lost his head and therefore scored an own goal. I'm saying he lost concentration and therefore drifted out of position, and that's down to a bit of an overall head loss. And I wonder, is that something that needs to be addressed by Silva? Is it something that we need to be considering? Because it's not the first time it's happened this season either, where you can see. And the question I was going to pose is, Anthony Robinson had the captain's armband. I love Robinson as a player. I don't think he has the leadership qualities to actually instill some calm in a situation like that. I think someone like Tom Cairney is very good at being able to stay calm in a situation like that. Leno potentially as well, even Anderson, if he's got the captain's armband on, maybe feels a bit more responsibility for staying calm in a situation like that. And I just wonder if we're missing that sort of leader on the field. So, like someone like a Polina, for example, who has this presence about him to actually keep everyone calm in a situation like that. Do you feel like we're missing some sort of leadership on the field?
Well, look, there's probably something in that. But if you go back even one step further, Silva is what he is. I think he, his character, his passion is a big element of how he approaches the game, and I don't think you're ever going to dilute that. And while his discipline definitely could be better, because I think he just wastes a lot of time on fairly pointless arguing with fourth officials, which can only kind of go against you, really. Um, it's entirely pointless, but he clearly can't control his frustration, and it's sort of a, on one hand we kind of love him for it because there's no question about his dedication and his passion in the moment, but I don't think it's very effective. And as you guys have both said, it's probably sets a bad culture. Yeah, I do agree with you about Robinson. I like him. I understand why he's got the armband. I think it's probably quite important in terms of what the club and Silver feels he needs to be offering um, Robinson at the moment. But I don't think he's that man in the moment that you're talking about. Definitely not.
I think he's a lead by performance player rather than like actual leadership. You're making him captain because he's consistently performing at the level that you expect from everyone else in the team. But when you actually need someone to bring the side together and act as that leader in the team and take control, I don't think Robinson's that person. It's nothing against him. I think that's an intrinsic thing that some people have and some people don't, and it's not something that Robinson has, unfortunately. But look, it's like Skibby said, the game felt fairly balanced until I'm going to say maybe about the 20-minute mark, where a number of fouls had gone against us, and Palace just started to get a little bit on top of us, get under our skin, and that was the result. And going into half time, 1-0 down, it felt like big changes needed to come. And Dad, I'll throw to you first on this. Silva's substitutions, like I said, throughout the season have been very good. I think he got them very wrong on the weekend. Would you have liked to see some subs at halftime? Do you think it warranted that?
I I just don't think Silva's that brave, actually. I think he's a master tactician, but when things don't work, some might view that as stubborn. I think it lacks a bit of creativity and it lacks a bit of courage because there are, and maybe it's also an element of being able to admit that you're wrong and you make a change. If we had no options on the bench and a really, really thin bench of some youth players and some, championship type players, I could understand why he wouldn't want to change it up. But we do have some very, very, we got 3 or 4 really, really good quality players on the bench, which do give you some formation options. But he won't do that early in a game where I'd like to see him go, this is not working, made a mistake, they're outplaying us. They've picked a formation that is causing us an enormous amount of trouble. I'm going to change it up completely. We're a goal down. Yeah, let's make a change at half time. But it never, it's, I think it's happened once in memory, in my memory. But yeah, I remember doing some research on this in the last couple of weeks. I'm just looking at striker effectiveness. And one of the things that came out of it was when Muniz comes off the bench, he scores between, I think it's like 15 or 16 and 25 minutes. That's how much time he needs. So statistics say he's never going to score if you give him only 15 minutes. And my instinct is that he needs quite a bit longer than that. And so that's a bit of a frustration, off the bat. but I particularly, I mean, what we needed was goals. So particularly yesterday, I thought I was a bit frustrated with Raul's game. I didn't have a problem with his effort, um, but his final quality was really lacking. And he had a lot of opportunities really, um, and he's even some of his play in the middle of the ground was just not even up to his best. And I would have dragged him. I would have dragged him really early to give Muniz a chance.
Yeah, I think I never have an issue with the effort that Raul puts in. If he's someone who runs hard throughout most of the game, but it just felt like it wasn't the right game for him, and it kind of frustrates me that Silva didn't pick that at the same time everyone else did. And it's interesting you pull up the stats about how long it takes or how long Muniz needs to score. I think in general, if your striker hasn't scored, or not just hasn't scored, but if your striker it looks like he's struggling to create chances or get on the score sheet after an hour, I think almost always they need to be dragged. If they're creating lots and getting shots on target, I think you maybe stick with them for a little bit longer. But it just wasn't working yesterday, and that was clear at half time, I'd say. I think at that point we should have made the change, and it's disappointing that we didn't, because I agree. Muniz got 10 minutes yesterday. Admittedly, with injury time, it was 18 minutes, but 10 minutes isn't enough for a player to make a proper impact. And we did have good options on the bench as well. Willian, Muniz, Cess, who's played well recently, Pereira, all could have come on and made an impact. But look, the first subs came in the 58th minute. Smith Rowe obviously went down injured and had to come off. Sander Berger as well was brought off. He was on a yellow card, so that kind of makes sense. But the substitutes on Pereira was an obvious straight swap. Skibby, would you have brought on Tom Cairney? Because for me, as much as I love Cairney, I don't think it was the game for him yesterday, and I don't think he performed the way we sort of wanted him to perform yesterday.
No, and before I get to that, there is something that actually really annoyed me yesterday, and it was the Pereira substitution. So Smith Rowe was clearly struggling. I think Mary even put in our chat, said, well, is Smith Rowe injured? And then literally, as I read that message, he went down, right? He's gone down, he's struggling. Raul Jimenez is making this gesture to the bench. At this point, Pereira is still at the corner flag. And I was like, what are you doing there?
Yeah.
Surely somebody, whether it be Pereira, not knowing, or is he waiting to be called back? Is he not reading the situation? No one from the coaching staff is saying, okay, he looks crocked. We need to bring on Pereira, bring him back, get him stripped off and get him on. Because what happened in that situation, and I will get to the Tom Cairney bit in a minute, but what happened in that situation was Smith Rowe, clearly struggling, asked to be subbed, went off. He then came back on the pitch, fell over again and just went down, and then we conceded. Yep. Luckily, he was offside by like a toenail or something stupid. But I was fuming in the ground there at that point, because it pisses me off anyway that substitutes are never bloody ready. They look confused, that they almost are being asked to come on and go, oh, well, where's my shin pads? Where's my boots? You're on the bench because you're going to come on. Why don't you sit on the bench with your bloody pads on and your boots and ready to go? Take your top off and you're all ready to go. Right, on the pitch you go. And from that point, we're then on 11v11 and we're not being overrun and then conceding. We are bloody lucky that it was offside. But that was just one thing. I mean, the substitution had to happen. I think it was the right substitution. And for Tom Cairney, no, it wasn't the right game for him at all. I think in one of the opening statements I made on this pod was they are a very physical, very aggressive, and the way that they played was really interesting, because I remember reading in the chat that people were saying, "Oh, we can't handle this high press." It wasn't actually that high when you really break it down. I mean, the amount of times I saw Anderson and Bassi being able to bring the ball to probably around the centre circle or just the edge of the centre circle, and then for some reason it's almost like a switch goes off in the midfield of Palace, that as soon as that ball enters that centre circle, they're on you, and it just switches, and it's really strange because they're very standoffish. They're like, come at us, and then you think, oh, Anderson and Bassey, they're just bringing it home, bring it forward really, calmly, and then as soon as they just suddenly spring into action, they're like, oh crap, I've got to get rid of this and got to move the ball, and then more often than not, it went back to Leno or back to the fullbacks who had to handle it, and to bring Kearney into a game like that where he's not necessarily the quickest, he's not the most aggressive of players. I think if we had to make a change at that point, it really would have fit kind of Harrison Reed. I think, his sort of very pacey, aggressive, sort of bulldog-like sort of mentality really fits this game. But if you're bringing on a player who at times is a luxury player, gets the ball out of his feet, likes to pick a pass, likes to try and tear teams open who are potentially a low block, that's probably the Kearney's game. But yesterday, and then as soon as we had Andreas, who, bless him, love him, but not as a defending midfielder. But as soon as you have him and Kearney in the midfield with, I believe it was Sasha Lukic, Sasha's on his own at that point, and you saw the goal from Munoz, which is basically we lost the ball. Mateta did the bare minimum to get past both Pereira and Kearney, and that's just where you're just calling, take him out, take the foul. But as soon as you let him past you, I mean, it's the old saying, isn't it? You let the ball go past or the man, never both. They let both, and we get punished, and that's what happens when you have a very sort of lightweight, more technical flair midfield rather than an aggressive, combative one that we started off with.
Yeah, and Dad, I'll throw to you because I remember you saying, it might have been this morning that you mentioned it, but that it felt like an opportunity for a Harrison Reed to come on rather than a Tom Kearney, just to add some combativeness in the middle, if you will.
Yeah, and nothing more than that. I think as Skippy's already said, I think it would have suited his game. I mean, we know what we get from Reedy, but he's actually quite similar to. He's probably a more combative Hughes, and look at what Hughes was doing it to us in the middle of the park. But Skippy's also right in that they were very, very competitive in the middle. They were onto us very, very quickly. It started really with the fact that both Adama and Robinson were fairly tightly marked when we had the ball in defence. There wasn't that opportunity to come out. Normally, one of them has, they've got 15 yards, sometimes 20 yards of freedom to receive the ball. And we didn't have that yesterday, sorry. And I just think we did try to go a couple of other ways. We tried to go direct, wasn't working very well, mainly because we were overrun and we didn't have control of the midfield. But yeah, I think maybe what we're trying to say, not so many words, is that actually Palace played pretty well. So I think you've got to concede that they did play pretty well.
I think so. And look, a few people have said we were beaten by the better team, and I think on the day they were the better team. The problem for me is I don't think man for man they are a better team than us. I think tactically we got outdone, and Skibby, this season especially, I remember in previous seasons we've actually been very good at beating the teams below us but not being able to get results against teams above us. Feels a flip this season where we're actually getting good results against the teams at the very top of the table, but really struggling against the teams below us. I guess, question, which would you prefer? Would you prefer to get those big glory wins against your Chelseas, your Arsenals, Liverpools, Man United, and occasionally have these slip-ups, or be consistently good against the teams that we should be beating week in, week out, and not be able to get over those big teams?
Honestly, I think I'd rather be more consistent against the lower teams. It may sound really boring, but once you've cracked that, and then you're now looking to kind of build on that and then start taking some bigger scalps, I think you're in a better position, because I feel like for us to now take a step back to try and be more competitive against the teams who are below us, we're going to lose the way that we play against the bigger teams and getting sort of results there. I feel like because we're now, it's like running before you can walk, in my opinion. So at the moment, because we're getting these good scalps against Chelsea, points at Arsenal, and so on, it's a nice feeling. But we can't use those tactics and that kind of play, excuse me, against our sort of lower league team, or the sort of the lower in the league teams, just because it's just way, I guess, less structured. If that's a way, I'm thinking of like Southampton for an example, but they just sat back. They really didn't offer anything and just hung on, and we just didn't know what to do. But where we can attack, the bigger teams at the counter attacking, that's great, but it doesn't help us in this situation. So I would rather be more sort of consistent against the lower league teams, and then we can build on that, and then build on a game plan that helps us against the bigger teams. But I think it's just embarrassing that we're sort of talking about potential of Europe and pushing on and all this stuff, but we've dropped points now to Palace at home, which should be more competitive than it was. We've dropped points to Southampton at home. We've dropped points across the board, and it's just, when you look back at it, it's just not a fantastic read. And I mean, last year it was always, we get to about 40 points and we start to push on. We're at 39 points and we're starting to falter already.
I think it was last season, though, we were stuck on 39 or 38 points for like 5 or 6 weeks. And it feels a bit like deja vu from last year. Look, second goal goes in. We've sort of touched on it briefly. It is a good finish from Munoz, who had a really good game and gave us trouble throughout the whole day. I think it's probably one of the better right wing backs that we've seen all season so far. And it's a disappointing result. We didn't create any shots on target, which I think is a massive issue for us, because if you can't get shots on goal, how are you going to win a game? A lot of crosses sort of floated into the box, especially late on, that we weren't getting our head on, which is just disappointing. And I think, as you said, we just sort of game like that. It's Dad, your sort of final thoughts on Palace before we move on to talk about Wolves?
No, I don't know that I can add anything to this other than the fact that I think it would be fair to say that looking around the dressing room, I can't think of anyone who had a great game yesterday. Seriously. I think that we didn't seem, quite apart from the head losses, which I guess are at the heart of at least one goal, and I just wonder if there was a preparation problem yesterday. I definitely feel like Marco certainly didn't win the starting lineup formation and tactics battle in the first half, but then I'm disappointed that he didn't react to that, or didn't see it and understand it and make some changes. So I think actually I'm laying a fair bit of blame or responsibility at Marco's feet for this. We don't say that very often, and I don't say it lightly, but I do think there's he had a bad day at the office.
Yeah, look, I think that's fair. He was resoundingly outthought, I think, across the day, and it's disappointing because it's especially disappointing because of the way we clearly beat Forest by tactically being a better side. And yeah, it's a shame to slip up like this against Palace. A quick look at some of the stats from the day, which just sort of compound the disappointment. 62% possession for Fulham to Palace's 38%. 10 shots for both sides. Palace managing 5 of those on target. Fulham with none on target. Almost 200 passes more than Palace for the day. Similar number of corners, 7 aside. And somehow Fulham committed 10 fouls and Palace only committed 7 for the whole day, which I think should be about tripled by the end of it. But
how do we commit more fouls when we have more of the ball? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, that's just proof in itself. How do you do that? If you've got the ball and you're passing it around more often and having more possession for the game, but somehow foul more often, doesn't make sense whatsoever. But look, let's put Palace to bed and look forward to...
May I just ask one question before we move on?
Go on.
Anderson and Eze, when they had their little standoff, and
Mhm.
Anderson was old tapping the imaginary watch.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that? Because I was annoyed with it.
I thought it was
Jack.
a bit weird. Like it felt like I get it, and maybe because they're sort of mates because they've played together for such a long time, they were sort of having a bit of fun. I would have, problem is there if Anderson lunges in, Eze probably skips around him like he did for the whole afternoon. We seemed to not be able to get the ball off him. So I understand that Anderson wanted to stand off and let Eze try and make the move. I didn't love it, but it didn't bother me too much. It was probably the
Well,
most entertaining Fulham thing that happened for the day.
it's pretty. I mean, he's not short on confidence, the lad, is he? It's pretty arrogant. But what do? You stand to look like a fool if you get frustrated and dive in, and then, as you say, very very high probability he's going to skip around you because he's clever and he's very slippery. Could you imagine if Anderson just kicked him?
That's what I wanted him to do. I thought the standing off
Uh,
was just too much respect for giving someone who
yeah,
is easily their best player and who's oozing confidence that much respect. He's just gonna grow into that, and his ego's gonna get even bigger. I just thought in that moment, just step in, just take him clean out,
Put your boot
and
through
just
him.
exactly. And then there's that wipe the smile off his face, but it just annoyed me that it was just too much respect shown, and I thought that was pretty much summed up the game for me, where Palace just came to play and we just gave him too much respect.
Yeah, I think that's not unfair to say. We did probably allow them to play their style of game rather than imposing our style on them. I think throughout the whole day, which is um, again, it just feels disappointing after such a good result against Forest and thinking this is our chance. Actually, Europe is still an opportunity, and then we play like that and go, oh, okay, no, that's why we don't keep getting carried away with ourselves because this happens regularly. Let's move on to Wolves. And look, this is a game where we got absolutely spanked by them at the Cottage earlier this season. They're sitting just above the relegation zone, and it's kind of shocking, especially when you see their result from overnight. They beat Bournemouth. How well, Dad? I'll throw it to you first. How are you feeling going into this Wolves game?
well, I think our anxiety about being able to easily brush Wolves aside says it all. I think it says everything about where we are at the moment. Um, clearly, they've got a couple of good players, but as a team, they've not played well all season. Really, they've not been consistently good. Um, and as a team, a few points above the drop zone, we should be absolutely dealing with them very very easily. But it's not going to be easy for us, and they we could surprise everyone and beat them because man for man we should. But as I said before, the concern we have going into the game, rightly so, says everything about our ability to hold our own against weaker sides. It's not good enough.
Skibby, I think we said it earlier in the season when we came up against Wolves. Do we feel like they're in a false position at the moment? They've only just sitting above the drop zone. If I have a quick look at the table, they're on 22 points from 26 games. They're admittedly 5 points clear of Ipswich in the drop zone at the moment, but 8 points adrift of West Ham, who are a place above them in the table. They're clearly struggling this season, but is that a false position?
No. And the reason I will say that is because I didn't rate the manager at the start of the season, Gary O'Neill. I just thought he was too Scott Parker-ish. I saw all the signs, and I know that there's probably fans, and there's probably fans I still speak to today who still rate Parker as a manager, but they just don't read between the lines. And Gary O'Neill was one of the exact same, where it was never his fault. The way that they're playing, he's got a very, very loose identity that sometimes works, but not often. But, when they started to call for his head a little bit, outsiders will start thinking, oh, but they beat who, or they won this game, and there's still some positivity from there. But it's almost like when you look at the positive games, like they probably took the Fulham thrashing and thought, oh yeah, what a great game. But then they'd go on the next week to lose to like Leicester and those sort of teams around them. So I don't think they're in a wrong position. But that being said, they've got a new manager in now. I believe they've picked up 9 points in their last 5.
Yeah,
So
well, let's have a look at their last 5 now. A
Yeah.
1-0 win against Bournemouth, a 2-1 loss against Liverpool, 2-0 win against Blackburn in the Cup, a 2-0 win against Villa, which is a decent result, admittedly a derby, which always throws out weird results, and then a 1-0 loss against Arsenal. Decent results in their last 5, picking up 9 points, 3 wins and 2 losses. 6 goals scored, only 3 conceded. I mean, the fact that they're actually keeping it fairly tight and those goals conceded, all 3 of them have only come against Liverpool and Arsenal, is that something to maybe consider, that we're not the most clinical of sides at the best of times, and going up against the Wolves side, who clearly have sort of pulled it together defensively, maybe it is one of those games where it will be a lot harder than it seems against Wolves.
I think so. And like I said, I think they've picked up. They are now playing a bit better, a bit more consistent than they were under Gary O'Neill. So I think they are a team on the up. And I think it's one of those situations where they've always had the squad. They just shouldn't have been where they were from the squad perspective, but they should be where they are due to the manager and the way that they played. So I think that old saying, giving someone the keys to a Ferrari, he doesn't know how to drive it, sort of thing. That was very much Gary O'Neill for me. But I think with Vitor Pereira, he's shown that they are picking up the right points now and being more competitive. And I think this is going to be really hard. I mean, the only thing that gives me hope is we're atrocious at home at the moment. We're much better away. So away to Wolves does work in our favour. But at the same time, the last home game they had, they beat Aston Villa in a derby. So, they're starting to get the belief back. And that's the other thing, is at this stage of the season, momentum is huge. As we can see, we don't have the momentum right now. I think we won 2 on the bounce, but never 3. I think for them, they're still fighting a possible relegation. They're only 5 points, I think, above.
Yeah.
I know you just showed me, but mine
it was
is like
5,
a sieve. But 5 points above the relegation. So they need to fight for points right now. And for Fulham, this is where we falter in the season. We know that. So that's going to be playing on our minds, that we get to 39 points and we can never make that extra step for whatever reason, whether it be fatigue, whether it be other things, or just stage fright. Getting into that, just the too much pressure of making that push for Europe. But for me, I think Wolves have a lot more to play for. They're probably arguably the more in form at the moment. So it's going to be a really, really tough game, and I do feel like they're probably going to be a very similar challenge, if not probably a little bit harder, given it being an away game than Palace.
Dad, your thoughts on Wolves?
Well, I'm sitting here listening to you guys, and you're making really good points, and there's nothing that much more to say, which is different. But I'm looking at those results, and really, if we had achieved those results, obviously we wouldn't want red ink and losses next to. We wouldn't be happy with losing to anyone, but those are pretty good results, and as you said, they're not conceding a lot of goals. The other thing is that whilst they may not have a lot of superstars, they do have Cunha, and he's clinical, man. We do not take half chances, and he's one of the guys who does. And you give him a sniff, and he will put it in the back of the net. So in a game where they should defend very well, they're not leaking a lot of goals, you have to be doubly clinical, and that really concerns me, because I'm actually at the point where I'm actually getting quite frustrated with Marco's continual backing of Rao to start, and giving him that much time, and he's not scoring enough goals. And Mooney's, per minute has actually scored a number of goals. He hasn't had many minutes, but I feel it's very harsh to judge Mooney's on his 10 or 15 minutes, he gets thrown as a bone at the end of these games. We he just hasn't seemed to have broken through to be given the opportunity. A number of times we've said, "Oh, surely now Mooney's gets his chance. He scored one. Surely he gets his chance to start." And it doesn't seem to be happening. And I I'm bothered by the number of opportunities Raul gets, in the final third, and doesn't put it away. It's not good enough. And I'm Team Mooney's. I'd like to see him start now.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that in a way. I think it is getting to a point now where I'm getting a little bit frustrated with the lineup, and it kind of bleeds into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the potential lineup for the Wolves game. And Skibby, I'll throw it to you first. There's obviously a few things to work out. Kearney came off with an injury. Smith Rowe looked like he's potentially rolled his ankle. I'm not sure exactly what that injury looks like. Your thoughts on how we line up against Wolves? It's obviously quite a small turnaround. We've got some injury things to consider. Do you think we go with what changes do you think we'll be seeing?
I think the forced changes are probably going to be the only changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll probably see, Kenny obviously won't make the squad. He didn't look in a good way. I don't think Smith Rowe will be risked. There's no point, especially with a game against Man United coming up. And I think the weekend game is probably more important for our season. I think I would rather we made a bit of a go at the FA Cup rather than finish in the top 8, if I'm honest. Especially now where I think the top 8 is going to be a big ask. And I think especially I know Brighton won, but Bournemouth lost. I don't think they may push on better than us in the run-in. So I think the 8th would still be a bit of a big ask, but I do think we should still hopefully go for it. But for me, FA Cup has to be priority. And I think in that instance, I would potentially rest players as well. So I would probably leave potentially Berger, maybe. So players like Berger, Anderson, I think Diop is an obvious player to come in, who had a massive cameo at right back yesterday, which I found hilarious, but I did enjoy that. But no, I think Diop in for Anderson, I think that makes up. I mean, Cess is within a shout. He's been playing well. We've got a cup game against Man United. I think we need to go for our strongest 11. Therefore, I think we could potentially see some of the fringe players actually come in. So completely contradicting what I actually opened this with. The more I think about it, but I do think that we'll probably see Andreas or even Josh King. It wouldn't surprise me if we are kind of looking at Josh King potentially coming in for this game, just to give him a run out, give him a bit more of a few more minutes. It'd be great to see his first start, but I think the game for me is we want to have our best 11 for Man United at Old Trafford. They're a wounded animal right now. We saw them. They came back against Everton at the weekend. I mean, I don't think that was mainly due to Man United's playing. I think it was more Everton just took a foot off the gas, made some substitutions, so it didn't work in their favour. But I think we should definitely be focusing more on Man United and potentially give a chance to rest some players for the game. But the one I'm really worried about is Castagna. He just looks so flat out. We just can't rest him. But I'd love for him to get a rest if that means we need to try and even start Diop as like a weird right back. That becomes like a 3 with whoever the left back is, whether it be Cess or Robinson, whether they bomb forward, then it becomes like a back 3. If we can sort of manoeuvre it that way. I think I saw that Tanton was back for the under-21s, but I think that was his first game back, so I think it'll be a massive ask for him to come in and play a Premier League game. I think probably be his Premier League debut. it would be huge. But no, I think we definitely will ring in some changes. I think, given us where we are with fatigue, but for me, it's Castagna. If there's a way that we can work him out of the team and save him for Man United and give him a bit of a breather, that would be the first and foremost. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we'll see Smith Rowe. But I think Muniz probably gets the nod ahead of Jimenez, even though Jimenez against Wolves, it's one of those written in the stars, isn't it, that he'll probably get a goal against his former club.
And it's an interesting point you make about Europe as well, because I think realistically, our easiest way or pathway to Europe is probably the FA Cup now. So it does actually make sense to put a bit of focus on getting a bit of a cup run and making it to the final, because at that point anything happens. And so I think it does make sense for us to be putting focus on that cup game. And I would like to see some rotation. Dad, your thoughts on the potential 11 this weekend? Oh, sorry, not this weekend, this midweek rather.
Yeah, well, there are some forced changes, clearly. Smith Rowe, he didn't look, he looked in trouble when his ankle was being tested in various positions by the physio, but he walked off. He didn't look mightily uncomfortable as he walked off. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but a few days of physio to young fit players, it's remarkable what they can do. But I cannot see him. I cannot imagine him being available. And why would you play him after that injury? So I cannot see him starting. I'd be perfectly happy with Josh King being given a go in the middle. Although I doubt that'll happen. I think Pereira will get the nod in the 10 and King to shadow him. Again, I'm going for Muniz on Tuesday. And if he gets one goal, he starts against Man United for me. I think Muniz brings an energy and a desire. And that's not that Raul doesn't put a shift in, but Muniz brings a kind of a passionate desire that I think is a bit
different
infectious.
Kind of energy.
It's infectious. It's the sort of effort that lifts teammates, and God forbid if he scores, everyone else gets a shot of electricity. And I think we need that because we're a bit flat, we're a bit fatigued. I'm not sure I'm with you, Skibby, about who I'd like to see replace Castagna, but I'd love the guy to have a rest because I think he's really in trouble, and I'm really concerned that when you get to that point of fatigue, you get an injury, and that would be such a big problem. I mean, I'd probably prefer to even try someone like Harrison Reed at fullback. I don't know if he's played there.
In his Blackburn days, he did.
Yeah, I think there's options there. I'd even consider Adama at right back, and you start Willian up the top, for example. If we're just looking at making some changes purely to give Castagna a rest, I think there's options there. Like you said, it's not a throwaway game as such, but it does feel like a game where you could potentially make some of those changes. And I think you're both right. We need to focus on Man United, and it's a shortish turnaround from a Tuesday night game to a Sunday game against Man United. We want to be making some changes, I think, and I'm hopeful we see some youth come in. Tanton might be too soon, realistically, but I think Harrison Reed is probably an option and one that I would be going with, or maybe even Cuenca. I think Cuenca's fairly adaptable and could be able to play at right back. Don't want to see Diop play right back again, if I'm being honest. But yeah, there's options. I did wonder at one point, I think he won a header in the box, and I went, is he playing up front as well? And I was like, oh, actually, no, he's bombing on at right back and getting into the box. Love it. Don't often see that from someone that size. But yeah, look, it's going to be a tough game against Wolves. I think we have to be brutally honest about that. This is a side who haven't performed well this year, but have it in them to pull off some pretty crazy results as we've seen so far. So They've got the players who make a difference, and I remember last time we played them, we said we need to be careful of Cunha because he can make a difference. He can make something happen out of nothing. We saw it happen against us a couple of times, and I'm wary that it could happen again this time round. Look, a very brief look at the table. Obviously, with the results last night, we're sitting in 10th place, a couple points ahead of Brentford, a good 6 points ahead of Tottenham. Man United sitting down in 15th place. We are 9 points ahead of them, which is nice to see. Definitely still in touch. Villa sitting in 7th are just 3 points ahead of us, and they've actually played a game more than us as well, but Newcastle and Brighton ahead of us still. There's a lot to play for this season, and a win against Wolves could easily see us jump up the table and push for those European spots. We're still, just 4 points off 5th place, so there's a lot to happen in this season yet, with 12 games still to go and a decent FA Cup run to come. Guys, I think we can probably wrap it up there. It's a lot to talk about with a wrap-up of a disappointing performance and also trying to preview this Wolves game as well. But look, I think it's been therapeutic to talk this one through. I was disappointed all day today, but definitely feeling a lot better now that we've talked about this one. Skibby, thanks very much for taking the time joining us today.
No worries. Well, yeah, like you say, good therapy session. So it feels a lot off my chest. Feels better. So yeah, bring on Wolves, and hope we can pick up from where we left off in our away games and leave all the sort of home disappointments behind us.
Absolutely. And Dad, thanks for joining.
Yeah, good to talk it all through with you guys. And yeah, I'm looking forward to. I hope we get a win on Tuesday, obviously, and I this Fulham team can surprise you, and maybe the surprise we're looking for and might just receive is an easy win. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Big thank you to everyone who's joined on the live stream. As always, we really do appreciate the support. As Colm has said in our live chat as well, please do chuck a comment or a like on the video afterwards if you're watching along on X, YouTube, Facebook. It does help other Fulham fans find our content. Please do as well like and subscribe and share the podcast with your Fulham community. Jump in the Discord, check out what we do there as well. We'll continue to chuck out podcasts. We won't be previewing Wolves before Tuesday night, but we will have After Dark on Thursday, a couple of special guests that we'll announce later in the week. So please do keep an eye on our socials. Thank you again, everyone. And as always, come on, you Whites.